Hey everyone, I hope you are having a great day and have been doing well. I was starting to put together some ideas for what videos I want to do. So I was sitting at my desk, I was brainstorming what different videos I might be able to do for the future. And while I was doing that, I glanced over to the side of my desk on my little side table here, and I saw my player's handbook sitting there, and it made me smile. Just it was like one of those just kind of instinctive. I looked at it and it made me happy, and I thought that was interesting, and that's kind of what got me down this little rabbit hole of what I want to talk about today, is the fact that having this game in my world, it just kind of makes me happy, just the fact that it exists. And I started thinking about all the reasons why is that, why does this game make me happy, why do I play this game, why do I like this game, why do I do everything with this game, and why does just looking at the book bring a smile to my face. And I was curious, with everyone out there, do you have similar experiences, whether that's with 4th edition or with a different edition of the game or with a different game entirely? Do you have that experience where just the fact that this game exists and it's something that's a part of you is something that makes you happy at an emotional level? Just the fact that it's there is kind of comforting. So that's what I want to talk about today, and some of this is going to be more of a personal story because of my connection to the game, and I'm curious to see maybe in the comments what everyone else's connection is to the game. But I was going to get into some of the more specific things too. So before I do that, please absolutely, if you enjoy the videos, please like this video, subscribe to the channel. If you're looking for actual 4th edition content, go down in the description, you'll see a link to my newsletter. That is where I put actual 4th edition content, so I talk more in detail about specific rules, and I share some things about different monsters and powers and things that I've created. So if you're looking for that sort of stuff, that's really going to be in the newsletter. I don't do a whole lot of that in my videos. These are more kind of my rants, my rambling thoughts about the game and what's going on with the game and things like that. So definitely check out the newsletter. And then also, absolutely leave comments in this one in particular, because I feel like this is one where we all have a different connection to it, and I'd love to hear what everybody's history is and some of the things about why you connect with this game or with other games. And so I'd love to see some of that down in the comments as well. So with that, so the thing is, why did the book make me smile? And obviously the first part of this is really the personal connection to it, because how and when I started playing 4th edition and Dungeons and Dragons is that's going to be a connection that everybody has their own experience with. For me, I knew about Dungeons and Dragons for as long as I can remember. I know that I had seen it in movies and TV shows and stuff. There were just references to it. I would see the kids at school with the weird dice that they would use and be like, oh, that's interesting, because I only played things that had D6s, and seeing these other dice was kind of interesting. I would see the books in the bookstore and stuff. I had a little bit of exposure to it in junior high, where I played a couple small sessions with a group at school, but not even enough to really make much of an impression for me, because it was very, very limited time that we had. I didn't even make my own character or anything like that. But it always stayed with me. I would always still see the books in the stores and everything, and it stayed with me. And it was just always curious about what the game was and how you play that game, and it seemed really kind of interesting. And some of it was certainly probably wanting to have, wouldn't it be nice to have a group of friends that also had an interest in that and want to play the game and get into it. I never really found that during all those years, a group that would be willing to play. I probably could have looked a little harder, but it was it was always just something that was a curiosity for me. And then if we fast forward to 2012, when my kids had gotten to an age where they were moving beyond games like Candyland and Checkers and the basic games that kids can play that have very simple rules, and they were able to play things that had a little more complexity to them. We had started playing Risk, we had started playing Clue, I think we had already started playing like Ticket to Ride, so we were kind of on this board game kick. And we were trying to think of what other games we might want to play, and I dug out my memories of Dungeons and Dragons, and this is a game that I would really like to see. Is this something that we would like? The being able to make a character and go on these adventures and things. I was curious about it, so we went and picked up the The red box starter set was what we found at the game store, and brought it home, and I just instantly loved every bit of it. I loved making the characters. I loved making encounters. I loved playing with the ones that were in the book. I loved learning everything about it. And all I had was the red box starter set. I didn't even have my player's handbook yet, but I couldn't wait to get a player's handbook so I could actually make all the different types of characters. It was just, everything was just great, and and the kids liked it, so we got to play with it. It was something that they enjoyed, and because of the way 4th edition was with the combat, it was like right up their alley as far as beating on things with hammers and swords and axes and everything. So for me, the first thing of, why does the game make me happy? It's like, well, it's the nostalgia. It's the, every time I see the books, in particular the player's handbook, even though the player's handbook isn't what the first thing I bought, but when I see that book or the other books, it just brings me right back to that moment in time where I was first getting into Dungeons and Dragons, and it was like, and this was my first exposure to it, and it was such a special time for me, both personally and then with the game itself, because it was everything I hoped it would be. All those years when I would see the books in the stores and I would hear references to the game, and I thought about what that was, that's exactly what it was. It was exploring these dungeons and doing this role-playing stuff and doing this combat. It was exactly what I had hoped it would be, and it was great. And so every time I see the books, even the ones I bought more recently, it takes me right back to that moment in time, and just that's what puts the smile on my face. So that was the first thing. But then I start thinking about, okay, well, what else? Why else does this game make me happy? And then I started thinking a little bit more about the game itself, more than just my personal connection to that moment in time, but what about the game itself? Because I'm always curious, what if I had gotten into D&D earlier? The times when I saw those books and thought it was interesting, what if I got into D&D when it was 2nd edition or 3rd edition? What if I didn't get into it later until it was 5th edition? Would it have resonated with me as much as it did when it was 4th edition? And I honestly don't know, because I'll talk a little bit about the specifics of 4th edition in a second, but because 4th edition is so different from those other versions of the game, and each version has its own unique qualities, and everybody has different things that they like. But I definitely question for myself, would I have enjoyed it as much if it was 2nd edition that I was playing? Would it have really connected so quickly for me? And I don't know, but I do know that 4th edition did. And the interesting thing for me is that when I started this, when I got that red box and I looked at it, I knew absolutely nothing about this game. I know I had seen all the books and everything, and I knew that these books looked a little different from the ones I remembered seeing in the bookstores and stuff. But I didn't know anything. I didn't even know that it was 4th edition. I didn't know that there were multiple editions of the game. I just presumed that it was the same game that had always existed, and they just periodically refreshed the artwork and refreshed the books and things, and it was basically the same game. I didn't know that it had gone through so many iterations and changes and stuff like that. I knew nothing about 3rd edition, so I was completely ignorant to all of that stuff. And so I was able to play 4th edition just as D&D. For me, that was D&D. That's what D&D had always been. I had no other frame of reference for it, and I just loved every bit of it. And I'll talk in a little bit about some of those specifics, but it was just like I had nothing that was skewing my opinion in any way. It was 4th edition, and it was just great, and I just loved all the things about it, and it was everything that I hoped it would be. It was only then over the next several months that I would be online, because then once I have it, I want to learn all the stuff I can about it. So I go online and I'm looking at all the things, and I start to see the feedback on 4th edition, and I see these people complaining about the game, and that's where I start first getting the hint that it's like, oh, this version is different from other ones. And people start talking about how they've moved on to Pathfinder, and because keep in mind, this is 2012. By this time, people had already, 4th edition was already basically dead. I think they were like a month away from releasing the last book for it. They'd already announced D&D Next, or whatever it was at the time. That was going to be D&D Next for 5th edition. And I didn't even realize that, but it was like I started seeing that there was all these complaints about this game and about the way it was played and how different it was. So naturally, I start looking into some of those other games, and I don't have any of those books or anything, so I'm just looking online to find what they are. And one of the things I know that I keep remembering is that how it talked about in the other games you had this challenge rating that you would use when you were putting encounters together to help you determine what monsters would go in there, and people loved that from 3rd edition, and it was removed from 4th edition. And I was like, oh yeah, 4th edition doesn't have the challenge rating. And so me, with my history, I always seem to be embracing the underdog. And so here was another case where I was just like, oh man, I've latched onto this game that everyone thinks is inferior to everything else, so it just it's in keeping with everything. My sports team never seemed to do as well as everybody else's team. The bands that I listened to didn't seem to win the awards like everybody else did. Now here I'm playing a game that everybody seems to think is second rate compared to the others. And it was just like, man, my imposter syndrome is just, in full force here. So, but and I even went and I started playing Pathfinder because you couldn't find a 4th edition game, so I played Pathfinder, and I like Pathfinder. Nothing against Pathfinder. It was good, but I kept circling back to 4th edition, and and it always seemed to be the one that it's like it did so many things that I liked that it was just like I wished I was able to play it more, and I wish that there were more people that had games for it that I could join. But everybody wanted to do all these other things. But for me, it was just I liked all that stuff. And it was after I had seen all those other things and I played Pathfinder, and after 5th edition comes out and I realized that they weren't going to just expand 4th edition, they were actually just ignoring 4th edition, going back to 3rd edition and making an extension on it. It was only after experiencing all of that I could come back to 4th edition and really identify what I liked about it and why I liked this version better than the other versions. And because I had to go through that journey and see all that stuff for myself, and then I can make an objective opinion that says, yes, this is why I like this one. I tried the other ones, but I keep coming back to this one. So, and others may have similar experiences with other games. If you started out playing 3rd edition or 2nd edition or one of the other editions, you may have the exact same feelings about that edition of the game. Because it just resonates with you at that point, and and the other versions just don't get it done, and it's just so But it's hard for me to say whether or not if I had started out 2nd edition, would I have just not gotten into D&D at all, or would I have still just loved 2nd edition, and then I would have been in the camp of people that didn't like 4th edition, at that point. So I don't know. I'm not sure, because I came into it and it was all I knew. And even after going and experimenting with the other editions, I still come back to 4th edition as my favorite version of the game. And so, so I've got the nostalgia aspect of it, and then I've got all that history that I did, the research that I did, and the experience playing the game that still bring me back to 4th edition and as the game that I want to play. And so then that brings me to the last point is, what about the game itself? And this is where we kind of talk a little bit about mechanics and the rules and stuff. And I think for me, and again, because I'm coming from the standpoint of not having played the other games at the time, this was the only game I had. And for me, right off the bat, and I'm going to flip over and take a look at, some of the player's handbook stuff, is that it's like, it was so easy to put it together. I mean, I started with the red box starter set, so it kind of walks you through. It doesn't really have a thing for you to build characters the right way, I guess, the official way. But then when I got the player's handbook, now I had everything, and I had a character sheet, and I could go through and create a character. And for me, it was so straightforward. It was like everything was right there. You got everything you needed to build your character because you just selected your powers. The powers were very easy to understand. They had all the keywords in them that made it clear what exactly you could do with that power. And it was basically, look, if it doesn't have this keyword, then you can't do it. Or if you want to be able to heal, you got to have the healing keyword in there. It's very, very easy to follow. And they had the little bit of descriptive text to kind of get you that feel for how that would look on the field, and it was just great. I loved the way it was structured, and then when with Pathfinder, and then when 5th edition came out, it's like they go back to this model of where the abilities are more descriptive. They're more about the prose, and you just got to kind of read through it and figure out. It's like solving a word problem, and you got to read through this and figure out what's the what is it that I can actually do, and how often can I do it, and what's the damage and stuff. Whereas in 4th edition, they didn't mess with that, and that's, right up my alley. Is like, just give it to me. Just, there's a little bit of flavor text, and that's good, and then the rest of it can be my own imagination, what I want to do with it. But the specifics of what it does are just very clearly laid out, and that's what I loved. And right off the bat, I was creating fighters, and I was creating clerics, and I was creating wizards. And it was like, it never seemed weird to me. The wizards had a little bit, because they had the spell book that made them just a little bit more complicated, but they were all approachable for me right off the bat, which I loved. And whereas it was then when I played Pathfinder and with 5th edition that I realized that the way you do spell casting is just a little bit different, and that just makes them a little bit less approachable for somebody who's new. Certainly, once you've played the game for a little, it's not a big deal, but me just getting started in the game, and I was able to pretty much choose any character that I wanted and be that spellcaster and do those cool things. I love that, and so that's what made it great. And from the player's handbook side as well, another cool thing for me was the fact that I love the items, the magic items, and I was going to try to pull those up here. So you get to the magic items, and I love the look of these. I love the orange or whatever it is for the color of the banners. But these stat blocks were, and I didn't know it at the time that these are usually in like the Dungeon Master's Guide as opposed to being in the player's handbook. So with them being in the player's handbook, they're approachable to the players, and now the players can look at all these different magic items and say, "Ooh, I want that. Ooh, that sounds cool. I'd love to be able to do that." So they're extensions of those powers that you get to do, and you can really start envisioning the cool things that your character could do if they could get this magic item. And they all have a little bit of flavor text and all that stuff. I just loved all of that stuff. And one of the other first books I got was one of the Adventure Vaults. It was the second Adventurer's Vault that had nothing but magic items, and it was just amazing, and I just loved all that stuff. And then once you get past from the player perspective, then I really started embracing the creating the encounters as a dungeon master. That's the part that I really love to do, and I looked at the Dungeon Master Guide, and it's just amazing to me. This Dungeon Master Guide is just incredible, and there's so much stuff in here. I've said it before that beyond 4th edition, it's just got such good stuff that works in any edition of the game. People complain about monster rolls. That's why I put it on this page, is because it's this. You can complain about rolls and character rolls and monster rolls, but they make it so easy for you to put together an encounter, because by understanding what the monsters are supposed to be doing, you get a feel for how that's going to play out in real time when you actually put the encounter together. And then I mentioned that before about the lack of CRs, and it's like I realized as I got into this that you don't need CRs, because they use the XP, and it serves that same purpose and even better to help you determine what kind of monsters that you can put in your encounters. And honestly, this math worked pretty well right out of the box. And even me early on putting together these encounters, it worked so well. And there's so many other things in this Dungeon Master's Guide that is great, and not the least of which is the cover of it, which has just one of my favorite covers of all time, with the dragon looking at the party. That is basically the cover from the player's handbook. I love that. I think it's a stroke of genius. So everything is good about that. And then you get to the monster manual. And I have Monster Manual 3 up here, so only because in Monster Manual 3 they did change the math a little bit, so they did acknowledge that there's maybe the hit points were a little too high and things like that. They structured the monster stat blocks a little bit differently so that they were broken down by actions, which was really nice, and you wish they would have maybe thought about sooner, or at least would have been able to continue that into future releases, but this came along so late. This was pretty much the end of it, but even without that, the monster stat blocks are so easy to read. You know exactly what that monster can do, and by seeing the different types of actions, it all resonated with me, and it still resonates with me as just a great structure of a game. They took the time and they made it a game that was really friendly for the dungeon master to put together. And so that's kind of the core rulebook aspects of it, and some of the specific way that they laid this thing out, and the mechanics and everything that really resonate with me. The part that I don't have a thing to show on here, but another piece that is big for me is the maps. Is that I love maps. Maps are like one of my favorite things just in general. I love looking at maps. And so naturally, Dungeons and Dragons is really big on maps, and whether it's a world map or an encounter map. And so, so in fourth edition, because it's so built around the tactical combat, where you would have a map of this room and a hallway or whatever, and you put your tokens on there, and you get to do things like shifts and flanking, and all this stuff means something. It's significant, and seeing it means something. I love that. That is clearly a thing that drew me to this version of the game in particular, is because it's something that I love. And so you obviously have maps in other versions of the game, but fourth edition right off the bat, it was like, oh wow, that's really cool. I get to, we can, where everybody is so important to what's going on in this combat, and you have all these powers that specifically tied to that. That just made it really, really special, resonated with me. And there's other things I could go on and on. I have a list of notes I'm kind of looking at here, and I've got other things like the fact that the Travail is out there. I love the artwork. I didn't even get into the artwork that I love. The style of the art for fourth edition is one of my favorite things. And then more recently, as I've been putting together this content, is the community. I've realized that there is a community out there of people that love fourth edition just as much as I do, and they were hard to find. We kind of were kept in the shadows and forced to play other things, or we had our small little groups that somehow we found. But now we're becoming more vocal. This is what I talked about in my last video, and it's like, and I love to see it. And it's great that we have people that we can. There's the expression that you gotta, you find, looking for your tribe. You're trying to find the people that is your group. And I mentioned how all through school, it's like I knew about D&D, but I never was able to hook up with that group of people who were also the D&D people. And so I didn't have the friends that were like that. And so I never got a chance to do it. And so, but now here we are, it's like there is this community of fourth edition fans that are out there, and it's basically what I was missing all those years is to belong into this group. And it's wonderful to be part of that. And I'm so glad that I get to talk about it, and that we get to experience it, and ultimately, when it comes down to it, that is all why when I look at my player's handbook on my desk, I smile, and it makes me happy. It's all those things. It's the nostalgia, it's the comfort food aspects of it, it's the rules of the game, it's the community, it's all these things that come together, and it's just great. And I'm glad that I have it in my world, and I imagine a lot of people, you have the same experiences. It's like the histories are all going to be different and unique, but it all brought us together into this point where we enjoy this same thing, and that's great. And I'm glad that everyone has that, and it makes them happy. So with that, I definitely would love to hear your stories, whether it's fourth edition or a different edition. Your first experiences with the game. Is that still the edition that is your favorite, or did you find better ones later on that you play that you enjoy more? Whatever it is, love to hear those comments from everybody, and look forward to reading through some of those. So, but if you like this video, please do make sure you click that like button, and leave those comments if you can. Subscribe to the channel. I definitely encourage you to head over to the newsletter and subscribe to that, and you can actually see some fourth edition content. But that is all I had to say on that topic. I'll continue working on my brainstorming for future videos, but until next time, take care.